So, hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation With. My name is John Lunn, aka Jonnychipz, and in this video series, we talk all things cloud with experts and advocates from right across our industry, covering a wide variety of topics from skills and careers through to technical overviews and softer skills. So whether you're watching this on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter or LinkedIn, thanks so much for tuning in. It's really appreciated. Please do take part in the chat below. Drop us a comment, a like and a subscribe. That would be absolutely awesome. Okay, so my next guest is a program manager currently for SAP on Azure at Microsoft and is joining me today to talk me through the basics. So based out of Mannheim in Germany, I'm thrilled to welcome my next guest on In Conversation With, Mr. Holger Bruchelt. Hey Holger, how you doing? Thanks so much for joining me.
Hey John, thank you so much for having me. How are you?
Yeah, doing really well. And as we said earlier on, it's a Friday, which is always a bonus. You know, not when it's a Friday anyway. That's when I put these videos out. But all good, Holger. Yeah, you know, enjoying things at the minute, keeping busy, lots of work going on, and lots of cool things in the cloud space to learn. So, firstly, thank you so much for giving your time to come on and say hello to me today. We've got a really cool area to talk about, which is SAP on Azure. We're really excited to kind of, you know, get the first-hand view on what's going on in that space. But look, before we get stuck into it, do you want to give yourself a little bit of an intro? Let us know a little bit about your career history and where you are today, Holger.
Well, thank you, John. Certainly, yeah. And first of all, let me really say it's really an honor to be here. I was actually really happy and surprised when someone suggested that I could join your In Conversation With series. So thank you very much for that.
No problem. Glad to have you here. Really glad. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So Holger Bruchelt. I'm a program manager here at Microsoft. I've been with Microsoft for 5 years, a little over 5 years now, actually. And in my role, I'm working with SAP. So my main task is really working with SAP as a customer, as a partner mainly, on integration topics, on architecture topics, to make sure that SAP runs best on Azure. And that's what I basically do. My focus on SAP is mainly because before I joined Microsoft, so again 5 years ago I joined Microsoft, but before that I was actually working at SAP for over 10 years. Have been living and breathing SAP for a very long time, and now I just switched sides basically, and now I'm trying to help our customers get the best out of the SAP and Microsoft investments that they have.
No, and that's awesome stuff. And, you know, I guess like many people in the industry, maybe many people in similar positions in the tech world doing work for individual companies or for partners doing stuff, you know, SAP is definitely one of those products that, you know, Microsoft have endorsed and brought onto the platform and are doing some great stuff with, you know, to the extent that you can actually get certified in this as well across the Azure platform. So, look, I mean, Holger, can we start with the basics? You know, treat me as, you know, a complete novice to the world of SAP. You know, I've got my ideas and I think I know parts of it, but how would you introduce SAP? Let's start there. How would you introduce what is SAP? Why is SAP an important product to our industry, and why would we be using that today?
So SAP runs your business. I think that's when we look at the Fortune 500 customers, or if you look at any business, I would say it's very highly likely that they are using SAP. And the reason why they're using SAP is, for example, for enterprise resource planning, ERP. I think that was one of the key areas that SAP really invented to standardize business processes. So if you deal with a sales order, if you have to create an invoice, if you do your financial data, if you are looking at HR, onboarding employees, paying the salaries for your employees, or supply chain. I mean, right now supply chain obviously is a huge thing. These are a lot of areas where SAP is really, really strong, where really a lot of companies, including Microsoft, are using SAP. So SAP has been around actually for, they just celebrated their 50th anniversary, so 50 years. So they've been around for even longer than Microsoft actually. And they have some really cool, fun facts actually. So I think, I don't know the exact number, but like 90% of the worldwide transactions touch an SAP system. Or if you buy chocolate, I'm a huge fan of chocolate actually. So I think 70% or something like that. I don't remember the numbers, but 70% of the chocolate producers are using SAP. Or from Germany, beer is obviously, or cars are very important. So a similar number of car manufacturers or beer producers are also really running an SAP system. So it's really everywhere. If you are in the business world, oftentimes you don't really know that you're using SAP, especially not as an end user. But in a lot of cases, SAP really runs the businesses, I would say.
That makes a lot of sense, and I suppose, looking at my own experience with business, I think I've been lucky, fortunate, or unlucky, whichever way you want to look at it, where I've worked both for a company that has been a manufacturing firm that has used and needed those business planning tools, ERP, MRP, all the other HR modules and finance modules. So in my head, I've got a reasonable idea of what these systems are. But equally, there could be a lot of people that have only worked in the tech industry, have only worked as a consultant or an architect, and may not be in that space. So I think it's a really good idea to kind of pinpoint, and you positioned that so well, Holger. I think, certainly SAP is one of those products that I personally have known about for a long, long, long time. But I've never been in that world. I've never had to work with it, but I've known of it. I know what it's used for. So, I mean, that's a great tick. So we've got a good idea of what SAP as a product line is and what it's used for. It's there to run people's businesses, I guess, is the bottom line. Where does this interconnect come from in terms of SAP on Azure? Is this, explain that to me, Holger. Where does that link come from, first off?
So, the best step basically is if we take a look at what is the core SAP system. So SAP, they had for years a product called SAP NetWeaver. So it was an on-premise system with a classic database and application server, and the end users would just connect from a user interface to this application service, and that's how you would create a leave request, or you would create a sales order or whatever. And these SAP systems, they run on any database. So that's what SAP calls them, any DB. So this could be a SQL server, this could be an Oracle database, this could be a DB2 from IBM or something. So there were a number of databases that are there. Now, SAP recently, or actually I think it's already 5 or 10 years ago, they released a new product called S4HANA. And with S4HANA, they changed the database. So they introduced an in-memory database called SAP HANA. And since it is all in memory, you need very big memory sizes there. So we have literally customers that have an SAP system with 24 terabytes of memory. So not disks, but really memory. And with this, obviously, when customers migrate to S4HANA, one point that customers go through is, well, what do I do now? Should I buy new hardware? Should I invest in my own data center? Should I work with this? Or should I now take the step to the cloud? Should I now really benefit from all the flexibility, the flexibility and scalability of a cloud? So that's where one area where we see a lot of customers, a lot of SAP customers saying, well, instead of me now buying new hardware, investing again in a lot of hardware, why not go to the cloud? And that's when they look at, well, what is available. SAP is very specific, and you already mentioned there are a lot of certifications available, also for us as a consultant, obviously, that we can get certified for SAP on Azure. But also, if you want to run an SAP system in a cloud provider, you also need to make sure that SAP has actually certified the runtime, the virtual machines, the storage, the networking components. And that's actually where on Azure we have a huge set of these certified components, so that customers say, well, instead of me buying new hardware, investing in all of this, why not do a fresh start, more or less, in Azure? There are obviously a lot of other customers that are just saying, well, although we're not yet going to S4HANA, let's just do a lift and shift and take the existing workload that we have on premise and just move this into Azure. But that's very often one starting point when we see customers migrate their on-premises SAP systems into Azure so that they can really run SAP on Azure.
Right, okay, so I'm starting to see then. So the whole premise behind SAP as a solution, a product, to move that into Azure as a cloud platform, like you say, one, if you move into this new architecture of an S4HANA database backend, potentially if you're going to do that in your own private data center, that's going to be some serious investment costs in terms of the hardware capacity to support those kind of memory requirements that would be needed to that hardware to certify. So what you're saying is that Microsoft have got those components readily available in the cloud platform of Azure that can be spun up. They're already certified for use with SAP as a product, and we can get those spun up and get those configured in the configuration that we need. Am I understanding that right, Holger?
Exactly, and that's very often just the foundation. So with this, I have an easy choice to get started. There are even, and that's really the power of the cloud and Azure in this specific case. If you are a customer and you're thinking, well, I've run my SAP system now for 20 years, everything is perfect, but now I've heard about this new version S4HANA, and I know it requires new hardware, new bigger machines and stuff like that. So I'm not 100% sure what should I do. Well, then with the cloud, with Azure, you literally can spin up an S4HANA system in your own Azure subscription within a few hours. Then you can test it. If it's working great, then perfect, you can continue. But if you're saying, well, no, maybe not yet, it's not yet ready, I don't see the value, then you can just delete it again. So you have really this huge flexibility of running your SAP systems in an Azure environment. And then once you have it there, that's where you can really then benefit from a lot of other SAP Azure specific services that we have available.
Yeah, and I guess we'll touch on a few of those in a second, Hole. But I was just going to ask you, around about that transition, when you do have businesses where they've got, like you say, they've probably been running these systems maybe for 20, 25 years. They've been running for a long, long time. So I'm seeing probably lots of big databases hanging around the system, probably a lot of aging hardware and solutions and systems and hodgepodge of infrastructure if it's not being maintained in the best of ways. I'm trying to keep it real best I can here, Holger. We know what the real world can be like at times. How does that transition work into an Azure platform? Are we talking brand new infrastructure, brand new configuration and brand new instances of SAP? Or is there some kind of a hybrid mode that can be run at that SAP, that application level? How does that work, Holger, just out of interest?
No, that's a perfect question. And we see both sides, I would say. So we see customers that really do a so-called greenfield approach. They really start from scratch. They set up a new environment in Azure. They get rid of all their old data and they have a new start. But honestly, in a lot of cases, this doesn't work. You need to obviously have a legacy. You have a lot of information, and you in a lot of cases you really want to take continue this story basically. So what you can do, what we very often see is that you set up your system in Azure, and then you do a failover basically from your on-premise environment into Azure. So think of if you look at SQL Server, for example, or also Oracle or something like that. So you set up your target infrastructure on Azure, and then at some point in time you fail over from on-premise into the Azure cloud. So basically you replicate all the data that you have on-premise, and then you continue to work with the data in Azure. And actually, just since you mentioned. There are also some bigger systems available. Just recently, we had a customer that migrated his 100 terabyte Oracle system from on-premise into Azure. So obviously that was a bigger project and a lot a lot of tests and making sure that it really works. But it just shows that Azure is good for smaller systems, but it's also really, really good to handle larger systems like this 100 terabyte Oracle system, for example.
Oh, it's phenomenal, isn't it? I mean, I think you hear these stories about, such large systems and large platforms being able to be consumed and migrated, and you think, wow, okay, yeah, that's it. I'm fully on board with that, and it's great to see. I mean, it's fantastic. So, I mean, I guess you were alluding to there, Holger, that there are things coming, and I guess moving your SAP system into a cloud platform is going to unlock some capability, in the sense that we know a cloud fabric, a cloud platform, is fantastic for innovation. It's fantastic for, lowering those barriers to entry to certain technological capabilities. How is that playing out in the SAP world at the moment, Holger? What is happening in that space?
Yeah, and I think that's really very often when you talk to customers about migrating an SAP system to Azure, they first of all just think of, well, we replace the hardware. So instead of running something on premise in our own data center, now we have some virtual machines, but that's it. But it's far more than that. And for example, if you look at backup and restore, if you do this on premises, you are responsible for maintaining not only the backups, but also the backup infrastructure and all these kind of things. Now, in Azure, we obviously have Azure Backup as a service that you just click on and then you activate it. But we have this very specific also for SAP. So we have an Azure Backup for SAP solutions that allows you, for example, to connect to an SAP HANA database and to back up this HANA database with all the tools that are provided with Azure as a platform, as a service. So you don't need to maintain and patch and operate the backup infrastructure. This is all provided by Azure.
So what you're saying, we could use a traditional or common, site recovery vault. We could point that at a SAP for HANA database and use the same kind of policies and the same mechanisms to back up those databases. Ah, fantastic.
Exactly. And then also with all the capabilities that I could have regional replication, for example, or zonal replication of my data vault, backup vault. So, and these are capabilities that are not easily available on premises. And now in Azure, I can just do a check and I'll just select, I want to replicate the data to another region, and the data is safe, even if there's a regional disaster or something like that.
I mean, you're so right to bring those up as points, because back to when when we were speaking just before we hit record, that whole thing of things that you just take for granted, when you're looking at those kind of systems. And in my experience, when you've got, large systems, business systems that are running on premise, you're so right, to try and make those highly available across different regions. It's one of those things that I shouldn't forget, but sometimes it slips your mind to really think about. But, the entire, because I think I spent too long working in the cloud now, but the fact that you can just tick that checkbox and now makes that available, you forget what it was like in the traditional world at times, don't you? And think that would have been a large pain in the backside to get that arranged. But yeah, I mean, it's great to see. And I suppose from an SAP consulting perspective, that is a game changer in itself. Yeah, that itself would be something huge to be able to be a benefit to move into the cloud.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not only the backup, it's monitoring, similar thing. So we have Azure Monitor, and we have an SAP specific extension for Azure Monitor. So that you not only can monitor your virtual machine and the networking throughput and stuff like that, but you can really look within the virtual machine, within your SAP system, and then all of a sudden get the information on what is also really happening in the SAP system. And all of this is then available for you in the in log analytics, obviously, and you can use this information to really drill down on why is the performance not good, or why is this sales order not yet processed, and you can really trace the information, and that's for me really some of the huge benefits. Or actually, one other thing that I find really interesting when I started with Microsoft, the first discussions that I had with customers was about, well, what about security? What about compliances? Can I actually move my SAP system in Azure? Is it really secure? In the meantime, and that is really something that I find personally very amazing, because it was really a journey for me as well. Now I have customers that are going into the cloud because of the security. And for example, if I look at Microsoft Sentinel, Microsoft Sentinel is this SIEM solution that allows you to collect a lot of security relevant information and then correlate this information. And we've just released, it's currently in preview, but an SAP extension for the for Microsoft Sentinel, so that you can not only retrieve the information from Azure itself, from Azure Active Directory, from your Microsoft 365 information, but you can take all this telemetry information and correlate it with security information from your SAP system. And that for me is again a huge game changer, because now I can, for example, check if the user Holger logs into Office 365 in Japan, and then 5 minutes later the same user logs into the SAP system with maybe an SAP all, so an administrator user basically. If I have now the possibility to correlate these two informations, then I can really raise a signal, I can raise an alert and really highlight or flag this activity. This is something that would never have been possible on premises with the installations that I have. But now, because of this overall insights that I get with Microsoft Sentinel, for example, I can really get these informations. And that was really something that was very interesting for me to really see in my discussions with customers, that this aversion at first, no, I'm not going to the cloud, it is way too unsecure, to, there are so cool features there on Azure that it actually helps me to protect and secure my SAP system. So that was quite interesting to see.
Yeah, and I guess back to that point, I guess it's leveraging the power and the capability of the cloud platform and all the feature sets that have been added in from, like you say, from a monitoring perspective, from a security perspective, even I guess from a deployment perspective. I mean, do you see? I'm presuming here, Holger, that the deployment of infrastructure to support a SAP environment is all effectively going to be VMs, storage, and potentially some form of load balancing in certain elements. Am I far wrong, or are there any specific SAP cloud developed things that are going on there, or is it all based off that traditional view of infrastructure as a service? Do you know?
I think it's mainly classic infrastructure as a service, which is good and bad. But so for SAP, I cannot select any virtual machine, for example. I cannot select any storage configuration. SAP is very strict when it comes to supporting an SAP system on Azure. So if I'm a customer and I am facing an issue, I create a ticket with SAP, then SAP wants to make sure that the installation, the configuration has been according to the recommendation or the guidelines of SAP. So that's why, for example, if we look at our automation deployment framework that we have for SAP, where we provide you with a Terraform and Ansible scripts that allow you to install an SAP environment. So as you said, the right virtual machines, the right networking layer, the storage configuration, load balancers, maybe a pacemaker cluster for high availability and stuff like that. All of this is done with the deployment automation framework. And then on top of that, we also install or enable you to install the SAP system to run the required installers, to install the database, to install the application service and all of this really as infrastructure as code. So that's obviously the huge benefit again that I get in the cloud, that I can really repeatedly create my infrastructure in a very consistent way. And that's obviously where we take a lot of lessons learned, a lot of information from let's say classic infrastructure as code projects there.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense. Yeah, I guess, if you've got that IP, that intellectual property that knows specifically what VM needs to be, because it's got to be certified, it's got to be rubber stamped effectively by SAP on Microsoft on the Azure platform, then why wouldn't you put that as infrastructure code? And it's great to hear that that's actually what is going on. And you mentioned Ansible, and I presume to go and configure the VMs and install the applications in the way that is needed to support a particular project. I mean, it's great to see that, yeah, SAP truly has started to leverage all the power and the capability of being able to be deployed to a cloud fabric.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's definitely really what we see with customers, that it's so easy to install an SAP system on Azure, and really leveraging and benefiting from the different Azure services to run your SAP system. That's really interesting to see.
I'm going to divert off into a slightly different tangent here, and then we don't have to explore this too much, Holger, but we hear a lot about cloud-native applications being developed at the moment. I mean, are SAP exploring those avenues of developing their applications in a containerized modality that we can run on Kubernetes, or are we still looking at traditional VMs and databases? What?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to explore this too long if you don't want to, but
no.
thought.
That's a question that is very often asked. The thing is, the main products from SAP, so the S/4HANA system, the SAP Business Suite, the SAP NetWeaver system, they're not yet using containers. They're still relying on virtual machines, and that is something that I don't think will go away too early. So too soon. So we will stick to virtual machines for quite some time. There are some new products from SAP that are more and more adopting these containerized workloads. But yeah, again, the main system of an SAP system, the S/4HANA system, that is still running on virtual machines. Now, SAP has these extension stories where they're saying, they have this mantra, keep the core clean. So don't do modifications in the central system, but do your modifications, extensions, and innovations outside of your core system. And that's where actually SAP is also positioning more and more container-based workloads, where you create a small application running in a Kubernetes cluster or something like that, and then from there you connect, for example, using OData or RESTful services to your SAP system, and then build new applications outside of your core SAP system.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, that mantra of keep the core clean, that's running on VMs. However, new functionality and modalities and things like that can be added using potentially containerized applications. And it's like you say, I mean, at the end of the day, if you've got a product that is, so ingrained in many businesses, and I don't know, it's probably not an overstatement, but to a lot of companies that use products like SAP, it really is the lifeblood of a lot of companies, isn't it? These kind of products, they are in every nook and cranny of that organization to a certain extent, running all sorts of processes. So it probably can't be overstated, the complexity levels that we're probably talking about here. Is probably fair to say.
Yeah. So stability is super, super critical. I mean, here in Germany, we had some cases when the SAP system went down for whatever reason, that we really had trucks waiting to enter the company, basically to offload their the stuff in their trucks, so that a lot of trucks went, they had to wait on the Autobahn, and there was huge traffic jams simply because the SAP system was down. Or you really have to stop your production, and stopping your production costs millions of dollars per minute or per hour in some cases. So the SAP system is a super, super critical, or can be a super critical component in your company. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I completely understand that. And I mean, just moving on slightly then from SAP running in Azure, I mean, what other elements of the Microsoft ecosystem can you kind of hook into from an SAP perspective? What are the futures? What's going on moving forward with SAP in this platform?
So one favorite topic of mine, actually, and we talked about this extension story, that keep the core clean, do the innovation and extension outside of your SAP system. One thing that I'm currently very passionate about, and that I see resonating very well with customers, is to build these extension application using low-code capabilities. And obviously, when we talk about low-code on the Microsoft side, we talk about the Power Platform. So we see a lot of customers that are using Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents, Power BI to build low-code application and connect these applications with your SAP system. And that is something that where all of a sudden we address the business users, the real end users that are working with an SAP system. And so far, these users were very dependent on the IT department. Only if they developed something new, then they could benefit from some new innovations. Now, with this approach of combining the Power Platform with an SAP system, all of a sudden we can empower these users to build their own applications, to build their own automation flows, to interact with SAP data, to interact with information that may be stored in the Microsoft Graph, to combine this information, to integrate it in Teams, for example, to have a chatbot experience or something like that. So that's an area where I see some fantastic new opportunities currently coming up. So really by just connecting your Power Platform with your SAP system. So that's something that is really cool, and I'm sure we'll see more and more of these applications going forward.
I suspect you're right. I think the Power Suite, the Power Platform itself is well, it's just gaining so much traction at the moment from that kind of citizen developer perspective. So now we can kind of enable, maybe they're not working in a technical role in an organization, but they have a decent amount of, because I guess you still got to have that slightly analytical brain to kind of put some of these things together. So, but that's that citizen developer. So it goes back to Microsoft mantra, I guess, helping everybody achieve more, which is, this is it in reality. This is it happening, I guess, isn't it? Which is cool to see.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Holger, we've covered, in quite a short space of time, actually, the basics of SAP, what it is, what it's all about, why it's good to run SAP on an Azure platform, the benefits, the certification, the specific VMs, the SAP for HANA DB, and the backup capabilities, monitoring, all native Azure things that we can plug in and monitor and protect the solution. Is there anything else we can cover off now before we go on to the final section of the show?
No, I mean, there are a lot of things that obviously why you should run your SAP system on Azure, and we could drill down into lots of different topics there. But in general, I would just say running an SAP system on Azure, almost of any size, is something that we really see with customers. And very often customers start with one system, and then all of a sudden they see all the benefits that they get of not only having a virtual machine, a flexible virtual machine, but really having all these different platform as a service capabilities that come with Azure that can really help the customers to enrich and build completely new scenarios there. And that's something that I find extremely interesting. So really not only talking about the infrastructure level of running an SAP system on Azure, but then really all the other capabilities that are at your fingertips once you run your SAP system on Azure.
I mean, that's the benefit of cloud platforms. Yeah, it's just that the low barrier to entry. You know that you can go and try something. You can try and tweak that and play with that, and it's going to be, maybe free, maybe very low cost. So it's a fantastic place to be at the moment. Look, Holger, you're convincing me that I need to go and study for this SAP on Azure exam here. Stop it! I got too much to focus. too many cool tech things going on. Holger, look, we'll kick off. I didn't give you the heads up before we hit record, but there's always one question that I like to ask guests on this show, and it's really one of these big, broad questions to just give your opinion, your viewpoint. But where are we going in technology at the moment, Holger? Why are we frantically learning lots of new, cool ideas and things? From your perspective, what are the next big bets in technology over the next 5 to 10 years?
So, first of all, I have to say the whole low-code stuff. I think that is something that will definitely come. What I think the whole artificial intelligence things is something that is where we're just getting started. And for me, where I really saw this is, not sure if you've seen GitHub Copilot. GitHub Copilot is this AI pair programming model. And that is something that was just absolutely amazing for me, where I saw for the first time hands-on the huge benefits that AI can bring to a normal person. I mean, I used to be a developer, 20 years ago or something like that. I really did a lot of development there, but I have not really developed for a long time. So for me, if I start something, it was always complicated. I needed to look up what was the exact syntax again and stuff like that. When I used GitHub Copilot, I recently literally developed an IMAP client because I wanted to move some emails from one account to the other, and I didn't find a fitting tool. So I thought, well, I know how to do this, at least to some extent, so let me give it a try. And doing this with GitHub Copilot was so amazing because GitHub Copilot just suggested always the right things to me, so that with my still basic development knowledge that I have from my past, I was able to develop this in no time, basically. And that is something where really I saw for the first time hands-on the huge value that AI can bring with me. And if I look specifically at Microsoft, I can see that we are taking these lessons learned, these ideas, in so many other products at the moment. Be it AI Ops, be it also in the Power Platform, for example, where we're really helping the citizen developer who doesn't know how to write code. But now, using AI, we can help the citizen developer to create the required or to generate the required code. And that is really something where I see a huge potential, where I think we're really just getting started. And there are a lot of things that will come where we don't even yet think about, but where AI will help us simplify and improve a lot of areas, I would say.
Brilliantly put, Holger. I think you're not the only guest to hook into the AI space, and absolutely well articulated there, because it is one of those technologies where I think people say, how does AI play into this? And it's like, how do you explain? Right, okay. And it's profound, and it's kind of almost ubiquitous when you develop with AI technologies. There's so many possibilities. Yeah. I did a video with a Microsoft colleague of yours, Sam Rowe, based over here in the UK, on GitHub Copilot as well, and it was a great session. And I know he's actually gone over to work for GitHub as well himself. So look, it'd be the first time I can put a little link up there to that video, but I'll try and remember to do that, with one of those cards. But yeah, completely agree with you. I think low code, no code seems certainly on the rise at the moment. It's getting so much traction, and it's such a magnificently powerful platform. And yeah, I'm with you all the way on AI, Holger. But look, Holger, are there any last parting words of wisdom you'd like to impart before we finish up for today's show?
No. Well, maybe some last minute shameless advertising.
Absolutely, you fire away. Yeah.
So we're running a weekly SAP on Azure podcast, actually. So if you are interested in SAP on Azure, then we have this weekly podcast where we talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. So maybe if you are interested in, join the podcast, subscribe, listen to it once or watch it once, and then stay with us if you are interested in this.
How can we find that, Holger? What's it called? And I'll make sure we get the link in the description below.
You go to YouTube and then SAP on Azure. So youtube.com/SAP on Azure.
I've got it here now. So what I'll do, I'll make sure that's in the links below for everybody to click on. So yeah, go and like and subscribe to that channel. I did notice that you've got a nice following on that channel there for SAP. So yeah, if you are interested, you've enjoyed this video, you've got Holger's details if you want to know more, and obviously sign up to the podcast there as well. Holger, it leaves me just a few words to say thank you for being such an awesome guest. It's truly enlightened me to the world of SAP on Azure. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, John, for having me. Thank you.
Anytime, and I'll catch you very soon on the socials.
Perfect.